Okay, well, let's go ahead and get started. Um, all right, so I thought what I'd do today, because pricing's come up a couple of more times, and so I thought what I'd do is I'm going to do kind of two sessions on pricing. I'm going to do one right now, which is going to be kind of a generic session on pricing in general. And to try to lay out the various things that you've got to be thinking about, looking at, and some of the different techniques that you can use. And then what I'll do is I'll do another session and I will focus it specifically on pricing out Everlesson and the lead conversion system, and we'll look at ways to and methods that you can price those products out. And because I think if we do this generic one first, then you can actually just take what I give you and go back and just apply it to Everlesson and lead conversion, and you should be able to be fairly successful in setting your pricing. So with that, let me share my screen. With 1 second. Okay. Let's pop this up. That's not where I want to be. Hold on. There we go. All right. That's not where I want to be either. That's where I want to be. Okay. All right. So we want to talk a little bit about setting prices, and you know, there's no magic. Although people will tell you that there's magic formulas, and in fact, I'm going to show you one of those professed magic formulas here in a minute. But um, the main thing in terms of setting your pricing is considering a few things. First, if you're just getting started, what do you really want to try to accomplish? When you first are getting started, what do you really want to try to accomplish with your pricing? Anybody?
Yep. Get your first customer.
Get your first customer. That's right. And in fact, it may be more than get your first customer. It may be getting your first several referral customers. In other words, you want to get a number of customers in the door that you can point to. If somebody asks me, hey, can you give me a referral? I can give dozens. I mean, I can give more than that. I can give a lot of referrals. Because what I do is that every customer I get, I always get champions within those customers, especially at the enterprise level. I'm always working to identify champions and then work and develop personal relationships with those champions. So even if they're no longer with that enterprise, they go somewhere else, they then potentially are a champion for me at that new location. But usually I've developed the friendship to the level where, they actually become good, close friends. I mean, for example, the two guys that brought me into Sony, I'm very close friends with them. And I've maintained a close relationship with them ever since I signed Sony. And neither one of them are at Sony anymore. But I've continued to do business with them. So one of the first things that you want to accomplish with your pricing, but you got to be careful here. But what you want to try to accomplish is to get a number of referral customers in the door basically under your banner, so that you have people to point to. And most people, when they ask for referrals, they don't ask for one. They ask for two or three. So you want to get at least two or three or four referral customers in the door. So and so you want to set your pricing. Now, here's where when I said you want to be careful, here's the be careful part. The be careful part is that you've got to be careful on how you do your pricing with those first several customers, because you don't want it to come off or appear in any way as your established pricing in the market, because that can come back and haunt you really badly. Okay. So what you want to do is you want to have your prices set at whatever the normal rate would be, but then offer these, first several customers phenomenal deals that they can't walk away from. For example, with Canon, when I did Canon, it was you pay for the development costs, and I will give you all the licenses for perpetuity for your employees. And that was for one of the products that I developed. That's what got me in the door. So they paid for the development. I retained the intellectual property rights. They got the licenses that they needed for all of their employees, which they had been paying quite a bit of money for up till that point. So it was a big savings for them. So it was a win-win for both. Okay. I've done things like, I normally charge, and I'll give a number. I normally charge $250 an hour. I normally charge $350 an hour. Okay, one of the things that most everybody makes the mistake of is underpricing themselves, and seriously underpricing themselves. Okay, so don't underprice yourself. But what you want to do is you want to set your pricing, and then, I'll say something like, I normally charge $250 or $350 an hour. But I'll tell you what, I'm really trying to break into this market right now, or I'm really trying to do this or that. And bringing you in as a customer would really help me to do that. So what I'd like to do is work out a really special deal for you, and then whatever it is. And it's going to be something that's ridiculous, and it's going to be good for them. And ultimately it will give me a benchmark customer that sets me into that particular space or that particular market. Okay, so those first customers that you get are really important, because they help you to build your brand. They help you to build your the awareness in the market about who you are, and they help you to establish yourself, because you've got now somebody that you can point to for the next customer you go to. Now, it's a developing your business is not a it's not a high-speed race. It's not a this is something that it's a slog. It's something that you do day in and day out. It takes time. It takes effort. And it's not something that you're going to typically do overnight, although there are some things that that can happen, and they will happen to you. They happen to everybody, as they have happened to me, but you have to be patient. And I'll give you an example. For example, you're going along, you're doing, you're slogging away, you're working your butt off. You get those first few customers in the door, and then all of a sudden you land this customer. It's a small customer, but it just so happens that small customer is a friend of somebody who's got, that's the CEO of a major enterprise. And the next thing you know, he's picking up the phone and calling that person and personally introducing you to them, because you've done such a phenomenal job for him. That kind of stuff does happen. So that's how you ultimately end up building your business. If you treat your customers extraordinarily well, give some of the first ones a really good deal so you can get them, basically booked and in the door and on your books. And continue to provide them with extraordinary service, and your business will slowly begin to build. And then the next thing you know is it will start to accelerate in speed. And not only will it accelerate in speed, it will also accelerate in size, and the size of customer and size of deal. Now, to do your pricing, there's some fundamentals that you've got to know or figure out. Okay, now it does vary between, doing services versus product. To me, products are easier to typically or easier to figure out, but services are not too hard. But some of the things you need to know. You need to know, for example, what your competitors are charging. Now, how do you find that out? Well, you find it out. Some people will say it the easy way, some people will say the hard way, but basically, you do your research on the internet. You do your research. I used to, for example, every year I would pull the 10K reports from key customers that were in the space that I was working in. If you don't know what a 10K report is, a 10K report is the annual filing that public companies have to do, and basically gives you all the information. This is in the United States, but it gives you all the information about that customer, about that company. That you get all of their financials, you get all of their strategies, everything are laid out in their 10K report, and you can get them typically for free right off the internet. And as you go basically to their website, you go to investor services or investor, that link, and typically connected to that link will be a whole bunch of financial reports, and the one you're looking for is the 10K report. Now, private companies are a lot harder because private companies don't have to produce any of that kind of material, so you have to research the hard way. And the researching the hard way is, I have gone into competitive customers and played the customer to them to see how they presented their product, to see how they price their products. I've had people that I've hired go in to case customers. I've done the same thing with competitors. You do what you have to do to get the information that you need to get. Trust me, they're doing the same thing to you. Okay, but you need to find out what your competitors are charging. You need to find out what your customers will pay. How do you find that out? You do surveys. You ask them. You can do generalized surveys. You can do very specific surveys. It depends on, for example, if you're just getting started and you're in a particular niche, go do like a focus group. Go either do a survey to all those that, let's say, for example, that you're looking at hairstylists. Well, you send a survey to every hairstylist within a 25-mile or 50-mile radius of you. Whatever gives you a decent number so that you can really kind of get, reasonable information back. And don't just send a survey. I mean, if you want to get people to respond, you got to do stuff. I mean, you've either offer a free Starbucks coffee, or do something that will incentivize them to actually do the survey. But you've got to you've got to do a little bit of digging. So you need to know what your competitors are charging. You need to know what customers will generally pay. You need to know. You need to make sure that all of your costs are covered. This is an area where almost everybody falls down. They don't look at every single cost they have, both direct and indirect. So, for example, take everything that it costs you to be in business, take it on an annual basis, and then figure out the number of days that you're going to work per year. Okay, if you're going to work every day of the year, 365 days, great, use 365. I'm going to bet most of you are not. So take whatever the number of days are and divide it by the total overhead on an annual basis and come up with a cost. Now that cost needs to be spread over your product because you got to cover it. So you have to assign a certain amount of that cost to your product so that you get your costs recouped. If you only have one product, What do you spread it over? One product. If you've got more than one product, then you're going to spread it over whatever number of products you're going to be selling. But you got to make sure that you're recouping every single cost. Okay. And then keep in mind, doing things like price matching is a risky strategy. I tend to stay away from it. If you're going to get into a price war with somebody, don't do price matching. It's a risky strategy. Now, there are all kinds of pricing techniques. I've picked a few of them. There's all kinds of them. I mean, you know, one of the things that when you've been around long enough, you figure out that, you know, people love to come up with names for stuff. They like to take something that's been around for decades, change it around a little bit, put another word on it, and give it a new name, and they call it their special technique. Okay, but there's just some fundamentals. Okay, there's cost plus. Okay, so what you do is this basically involves adding a markup percentage above your cost. And again, you need to know your total cost. So you're going to take a markup percentage and you're going to put it above your cost. Now, when I say total cost on this, what I'm talking about is you're going to have, if it's a product that you're selling, then whatever the cost of your product plus the cost of your total overhead, okay, and the allocation amount that you're going to apply to that overhead, you're going to add it to this product. And then you're going to set a markup percentage over that cost. Then there's value based. Does everybody understand that? Okay, if you don't understand something as I'm doing this, just stop me, okay? There's value based. So you want to determine basically by how much customers, what kind of value they will attach to a product, okay? Again, how do you determine that? Anybody? How am I going to determine what value a customer places on a product?
You can find.
No, Lois, you got that right. You can talk with them. Who else was going to say what?
I was going to say you can find out what other tools and stuff they've already paid for that's in comparison.
That's right. That's a very good one, especially when you're first getting started. People buy all kinds of stuff. And it's amazing what you'll find out when you just start talking to the customer and asking them about what do they use in their business. How do they solve certain types of problems? And they'll tell you all. I mean, people love to talk, and they really love to talk about their businesses. So all you got to do is ask, and most times they'll tell you. Now there are some customers that will be really wary. Though they won't want to give out any information, and so what do? You go to the next customer. There are lots of customers. Don't waste your time on somebody who doesn't want to talk. There are plenty of people out there. Your time is one of the most important and most valuable commodities you have. Don't waste it. If a customer doesn't want to talk, go to somebody else. You'll have plenty of people to talk to. Okay. But you want to come up with a value that people attach to that product, and then you do your pricing. It's what pundits call value-based pricing. Now, another good way to do pricing, and I want you to think about this. I assume every single one of you have at some point bought a car. Okay, I'm assuming by the silence that everybody has bought a car. All right. One thing about the automotive industry is that they have really wired how to sell vehicles. Now, they do all kinds of strategies to sell vehicles. They do front end stuff, they do back end stuff, they do tiered pricing. What would be a front end style of pricing? Anybody?
MSRP minus 10% plus 10%, one model.
That sticker placard on the front of the car.
Okay, there you go. Everybody get that? Well, first off, let's go back to Bob. Bob, repeat what you said for everybody.
I said the MSRP, manufacturer's suggested retail price, and then they advertise it for 10% below, 10% over, or rebates on that base price.
Okay. And then everybody hear what Tom said? They can put the stickers on the cars. Okay. What would be a style of back-end pricing?
They will try to get you to buy warranties and
That's where they make the most money that they make. Believe it or not, the car dealerships make more money when you walk into that room for the warranty and the financing. That's where the dealerships make almost all their money, is in that room. Okay, that's an example of back-end pricing. What's an example of tiered pricing? Anybody?
Based on all the options and stuff from a base model all the way up to a premium model.
Base all the way up to a premium. Now, when you think about how you're going to do the pricing strategy for your products and your services, think about these industries that have been highly successful. And think about how you might apply some of these strategies to what you're doing. What would be a possible method of back-end pricing with what we sell?
Done for you or done with you, or just you can do it yourself.
There you go. All you got to do, guys, is just think a little bit, look at some of these industries that are highly successful. You know, one of the things that always stuck with me, and you hear this all the time, but if you want to be really successful, model somebody who's been really successful. If you want to be really successful in business, look at businesses that have been highly successful and model what they do. Model the methodologies that they apply when it comes to their pricing and so on. And it doesn't necessarily even have to be a business that is in the exact same space that you're in. You're just looking for the technique. Now, when you work out your costs, okay, direct costs are things like money that's actually spent on development work. Now, obviously, this is not Chad's development work. This would be any development work that you do under your name, okay? You've got a fixed cost with what you paid Chad for your product, whatever that is, okay? You know, some of you may be on an annual program. I don't know what programs you guys are on, but whatever you paid for it, you know, you've got that cost, okay? But then if you, you know, add anything to it from a development standpoint, and maybe not now, but maybe some point in the future, if you do, then you need to make sure you account for that. You've got to make sure that you account for any kind of variable costs that are associated with any kind of materials that you produce, packaging that you produce, et cetera. Indirect costs. You know, there's, you know, usually the best way to do this, like I said, is, and this is typically dealing with your overhead, is to, you know, determine an allocation that you apply to everything that you sell, so that way you make sure you capture the total cost, but there's not a single product that's bearing that cost, unless you only have one product. If you only have one product, yes, go ahead.
If you paid in our case, you bought agency, okay? You paid a fixed price. How would you amortize? What way would you amortize that over the life? Do it on 1 year, 2 years, 20 years?
The way I would do it is I would typically look at nothing more than about 3 years.
And that would, of course, then, if you were looking at it from a tax model, then that would be your depreciation on the asset,
Yeah,
and you would have it paid off. And then at that point, your profit margin would go up as well. Okay.
that's correct.
Yeah, I was just, because that's software. That's not a hardware item.
Right.
So, okay, cool.
Which raises another point too, guys. Is one of the things that, and this is very typical in industry. You produce a product, and then you spend the lifetime of that product every year engineering out the cost. So, you come out with a price for that product, and that price is going to have the highest cost to sales ratio you're going to ever have. And then what happens is, over the lifetime, they're constantly engineering out the cost, so that their margins become greater and greater and greater. So keep that in mind. Look for ways that you can, quote unquote, engineer out the cost to you on anything.
So 3 years is not necessarily, that might be your standard, but if you wanted to do it over 1 year, you could.
You could do it over 1 year. You could do it over. I mean, I've had scenarios where I had a business, for example. I knew that I was going to be in business for no more than about 3 to 5 years, and so what I did is I set it for 5 years, because that was the absolute maximum I was going to be in business before I closed the doors. So it can be tied to your exit strategy, or it can be tied to your depreciation strategy. And in most cases, as a small business, you're trying to grab as much as you can, as fast as you can. And so typically those are much smaller time frames, 1 year.
Right. Or 1 year. Okay.
Right. Right.
On a lot of that stuff, you can write off 100% of it on your taxes here in the U.S.
Exactly. Right.
But I mean, that's just relating it to the tax issue. But still, from a business point of view, you're still playing with it as it's a cost you've spent, and you just need to see how you're going to amortize it over the time.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Yep. Now, the other thing you want to do is, another method is basically a percentage on break even. So what you do is you determine your break even figure. And then what you do is you take a percentage on that break even number. So you add up all your costs together, you divide it by the volume to basically, which will yield your unit break even figure, and then you add a margin to it, which is another method for setting price. A little more complicated, but it's another way of doing it. Cost plus pricing, again, it's a percentage of break evens. This is one of the techniques. So you need to add a margin or markup to your break even point. Now, how do you know? A lot of times you can use industry norms, or experience or market knowledge, depending on what you're working with. So in this, I'll use a really simple example to explain this, and then I'll relate it to what we're doing. Really simple example. Let's say, for example, you're selling vacuum cleaners. Well, vacuum cleaners, it's real easy to get information on vacuum cleaners. It's easy to get information on the industry norms, on industry pricing, all kinds of stuff. I mean, there's just tons and tons of information on vacuum cleaners, as there is on refrigerators and just about everything else you can imagine. Now, let's apply that to our product. There are lots of survey products. There are lots of appointment products. There are a number of electronic business card products. And there are, a handful of sales products, although nothing that's kind of really directly correlated that I've seen as a competitor to the pipeline management system, but there's some close. Look at those prices. Look at how they're structured. That will give you some basic information. On the value-based pricing, you have to know the market really well. I mean, that's because again, what you're doing is you're basing it on value, and you need to know how to set that value, and that value is set by the market. Some other things you want to consider, are you in a situation where you have to charge tax? Keep that, don't forget about that. Because the last thing you want to do is get yourself into trouble for not charging tax when you need to charge tax, and that's going to vary from state to state. Can you keep margins tight on certain products? Now, this is one, keeping margins really tight on certain products while you make your profit on another. So, depending on what what your product mix is, so I don't sell just Everlesson and LCS. I sell a lot of stuff. And so, there are certain products that I have big margins on, and there are other products that I have very, very thin margins on. Sometimes it's because it's my cost basis. Sometimes it's because I want to get into a particular market, and so I'm just going to really lowball that. And I'll give you an example. At one time, I worked for a company called Spectra Physics. Spectra Physics was the number one company in the United States in the heavy construction market in terms of survey instruments, laser guided instruments, laser-based machine control, things like that. There was a Japanese company that decided to come into the market. What they did was that they were actually, their parent was Toshiba, which is a very rich company. They literally bought their way into the market by losing an incredible amount on every product they sold. Okay, I mean, they lost millions of dollars just to buy their way into the market, so that they could basically grab market share from us. And it was for several years. It was an all-out war between us. So one way you can look at, depending on what you're trying to sell. Maybe you have some other products that you've got alongside of LCS and Everlesson, and so maybe you look at a slight variation in your product mix in terms of where you're pricing various things at. Because again, what's the name of the game if you're just getting started? It's to land 3 or 4 or 5, as many as you can, but land at least 3 or 4 customers as quickly as you can to act as your referral base. So you want to be able to give them really strong deals. You want your pricing set normal, but it's because you don't want to publish this pricing too heavily. You want to use this in the negotiation, but you want to be able to give them really strong deals. Another thing you can do is be a cognizant of regional and territorial pricing differences. There is a huge difference in terms of pricing products for the DC market versus pricing products for, let's say, Kansas City. Okay, it's going to be a lot less expensive in Kansas than it's going to be here in DC. Same thing with LA, for example, or New York. You pay a lot more money in certain territories and certain regions of the country than you do in others. So be aware of those differences. You need to stay alert at all times in terms of price changes. So flag a number of competitors and keep your eyes on them. Okay, watch what they're doing. Watch what their pricing is. Be observant of your customers. Watch how your customers react to your pricing. Customers shop. Customers, the smart ones anyway, are, they do their homework. So listen to what they say. See how they react to your pricing. don't respond to just one, but if you're getting a series of customers that react a certain way to your pricing, maybe you need to reevaluate your pricing. Find a way to develop a mechanism for yourself to constantly probe your market on pricing. And always price higher than you think you should, because you always tend to undercut yourself. This is particularly true if you do consulting work. I can't tell you how many people I've worked with, I've coached and mentored that just leaves an incredible amount of money on the table. Okay, your time is extraordinarily valuable. Price it accordingly, and don't ever let anybody devalue your time, because they won't devalue theirs.
Hey, Derek, can I jump in real quick?
Yeah, please do.
Thanks. That's a good point. But there's also the mental psychology behind that, because then when you're trying to get that first client / customer, and oftentimes until you're confident and until you can actually show like a body of work behind it, you're less apt to charge higher at the beginning. Or at least that's what I see with most of the people I'm around, including myself. And this was kind
I
of
don't disagree with that at all, Dan.
Yeah.
That's absolutely correct. What happens is that you earn the right to charge the rates. Okay, and what I mean by that is if you're just getting started and you've never consulted before, or you're right out of school and this is your first job, or this is the first company that you've tried to stand up on your own, and you've never consulted before on your own, then no, you're not going to be able to charge the higher rates. You're going to have to work your way up. Okay. So but what I am telling you though is that even within that, people tend to underprice themselves. So for example, they'll charge $80 an hour when they could really be charging $125. They'll be charging $50 when they could be charging $80.
Yeah, I've been
So
there.
So
I've been there and been bit by that same thing.
Yeah, I'm not saying everybody can just go right out and charge what I charge. I didn't charge what I charged when I got started.
But doesn't that more so apply for services rendered as opposed to, I'm going to use the phrase, hard product? And I consider like LCS
I'm
being
talking specifically about consulting.
Right. Okay. All right. I must have missed that word. Sorry.
Yeah, no, I'm talking specifically about consulting.
Yep.
So you have to. I mean, the other thing you've got to do is you've really got to establish a personal brand. Okay, and I'll tell them myself. When I was doing the Salesforce work before I tried to get into this IM space. When I first came out of the enterprise, I was, and again, doing development work. I can charge those higher rates. I've got the background, I've got the years of experience, I've got the referrals, I've got everything that's necessary to be able to do that. But I thought I could continue to do that when I came into the internet marketing space. And guess what? I got slapped down pretty hard because I learned that I couldn't do that because I didn't have any credibility in this space. So I had to build my personal brand. And that's what each and every one of you have to do. You have to build your personal brand and establish your right to charge those rates. And the way you do that is, it's a formula of time, product, and client base. And what I mean by that is it's going to take you time. You got to produce stuff. And I mean stuff like you've got to write papers, you've got to be published, you've got to do webinars. You've got to get yourself out there and establish your personal brand so people know who you are and what you're about, and the fact that you are an expert in the area that you proclaim to be an expert in. And when you've established that, then you will be able to start charging those higher prices. But it takes time to do. And that's okay. Again, this is not, a get rich quick scheme. This is, how do I steadfastly, regularly grow my business over time to be successful? And that's how you do it, day in and day out. You slowly work your way up. Now, in terms of the pricing models for services, you can charge hourly, you can charge a flat fee, you can do variable pricing, you can do project-based pricing. What I typically do is I tend to, I've gotten to the point now where I don't typically show my hourly price, although I'm frequently asked. What I will typically show is what I basically what I call a project price. In other words, it's essentially what it is if I have a particular project that I know I've got to do. Let's say, for example, I'll use an easy example. Let's say I'm doing a development project, okay? And I know in that development project that it's going to require my design work. I'm going to need a senior developer, probably a couple of junior developers, and a QA person. They all have different rates, okay? When somebody asks me for an hourly rate, what they get is a blended rate. And that's how I always refer to it, as a blended rate. Even if the person that's doing every one of those tasks is me. Because if I'm working by myself, a lot of times I will do the jobs that are, would normally be done, for example, by a junior developer or a QA person. I'll just do it. If it's a small project and I don't want to hire a bunch of contractors to work on the project with me, I'll just do the whole thing. So when I price it out, I use a blended price. I don't charge. If I'm working, if a certain number of hours goes into the project that would typically be done by a junior developer, then I'm going to use a pricing for those hours at that rate. But the design work is going to be charged at a much higher rate. QA work is going to be charged at a lower but higher rate than the junior developer kind of thing. But I never talk, I won't say never, because never is not true. I rarely talk about what my specific pricing is, because people get sticker shock. So I always talk blended rate whenever I can. Okay. As far as products go, it's margin added to break even, it's cost plus, market rates, things like that. Always want to be monitoring pricing again. You're constantly monitoring your competitors, constantly monitoring your customers. You want to look for ways that you can engineer out costs. You want to look for ways you can slowly raise your prices, and don't do it wholesale. Do it intermittently. If you only have one product, then so be it. But if you've got a number of products, what you want to do is you want to raise a little bit here and there. Don't raise them all at once. This is a site on the SBA. If you guys aren't familiar with the SBA, if you haven't used the SBA, they've got tremendous resources. There's really great stuff on the SBA site. Take advantage of it for research, for pricing, all kinds of stuff. This is a thing called, it's a way to see if you stand up or not. So it's a way to analyze your business. So you basically, and I'll share the link with you guys, but it's basically a way to basically put in, like if you're a beauty salon, what city you're in, you put a bunch of information in, and what they do is they'll analyze your business against others that have done the similar thing and benchmark you. It's a great tool. So definitely take a look at this when you get it. Okay. But the URL, in fact, what I'll do is I'll go ahead and put the URL in the chat. So you can get, oh, wait a minute, hold on. I got it in the show to be able to do that. Bear with me 1 second.
I use it all the time.
This tool or the SBA?
SBA.
Yeah, if you guys haven't, definitely you want to be doing it because they really do provide some great information and great tools that really will help you out. There's my chat, and so here's that particular tool. Let me get this to everyone. So that's the link to that particular tool. Okay. Now let me get back to this. Let me get that. Come on. Okay. Again, some guidelines for raising prices. Watch your competitors. If your competitors are raising price, it's a good signal that you may be able to raise your price. Raise if your customers are regularly stating your prices are bargain prices. Now just listen to your customers. They'll give you a good idea whether or not your pricing is too high or too low. Don't raise too much all at once, and definitely don't raise across the board. This is from a Forbes article. It's pretty good. This is called the Magic Formula, and I'll give you this link as well. But basically, it describes a method for pricing out consulting services. It's what they call the Magic Formula. And basically, what you do is you start working from your income statement. And for those of you that I've been coaching, you should be close to having your income statements prepared. So you'll be able to work with that. If you guys don't have an income statement, you should. And if you need to know how to do that, let me know. But what you want to do is it's basically profit plus labor cost plus overhead is equal to a daily fee revenue. And the way they break this down is, let's say, for example, you want to take home an annual salary of $200,000 a year or $100,000 a year, whatever it is. Okay, and you work 260 days per year. Okay, which in this case is 365 less Sundays, most Saturdays, holidays, and a few 2 weeks vacation. And so on a daily basis, basically you're earning $769 a day. Now you take your overhead and you break that down. So basically all your recurring expenses, rent, secretary, phone bills, VA, whatever expenses you've got, you divide your annual costs by the number of working days per year. They've also determined, there's a couple different research firms on this one in particular, basically that most consultants spend 58 to 62% of their time working directly for their clients. So then you take that a rate, 62% of those 260 days equals only 161 days per year, and that results in a grand total of $1,120 per day. So now you break down your profit margin. So a consultant's profit margin averages 15 to 25% of its total expenses. So continuing from the previous work, this piece right here from the overhead, what you do is you take 20% of that yield, 1,120 is $224. Now add it all up. You plug those numbers back into the fee formula, and your daily fee equals $769 plus 1,120 plus 224, or 2,113 per day, or $211 per hour for a 10-hour day. So that's one way of figuring out how to charge for your fees or for your service. Okay. Now that's a lot to absorb. So I'm just giving you the link so you can go back and read the article, and you can go through the formula and understand it more carefully. But I found that an interesting approach. Okay.
Derek,
Is there anything?
yeah, how much should we be putting away for Uncle Sam?
That's what I was going to ask.
That's okay. So for Uncle Sam, and that actually is part of your fee calculation for as part of your costing model. And it depends. So for example, right now they're getting ready to make some major changes again in terms of the tax code. So it'll be interesting to see what the end result is for small businesses. I've always targeted around 30, I think it was around 30, was it 30%? Think about that now. Because there's two things, there's really a couple things you want to, it's the taxes, and then also there's several parts that you've got to make sure you cover. It's your base tax rate, your
Federal tax rate, state tax rate. You've got FICA or basically Social Security if you have employees.
There you
Depending
go.
on
Thank you. Yeah,
it depends if you have
workers' comp,
employees
yeah.
or not, what
Yep.
type of corporation you are. But 30 is a good percentage to.
Yeah, I mean 30 is always the number I've worked with as a general rule. But you got to, again, as Bob was laying all that stuff out, you got to, you have to look at, whether or not you've got employees, whether or not you're a C Corp versus an LLC, because there's going to be different fees associated with that as well. And your tax rates are going to be different.
And possibility of a Social Security you may have to pay in.
Right.
That's something your tax guy takes care of. It tells you, but it's possible.
Yeah, I mean, again, if you wanted just a good round number, I've always found 30% that I've been fairly safe with that number. If you want to be extraordinarily safe, you can do 35, but 30, I think you should be adequately covered. Okay. Questions?
So would you figure if you want to make 100 grand, figure your income for 130?
Wait, say that again.
I said, so if you were figuring 100 grand for your scale there, would you add 30% to that? So you'd want to break everything down according to 130?
Well, I would take 30% of my income, which is my taxable base, and make sure that that's included in my overhead calculations and my total, cost allocation, that I'm allocating at least 30% of my salary to cover my tax liabilities.
It's kind of hard to say when you say, I want to make $100,000 a year. Now, is that gross? Is that net? Because if you still got to pay taxes on that 130 or that 100 grand that you're talking about. So it's how you allocate that. I am not a tax professional or a financial planner, so it's really just up your number maybe a little bit and talk to your tax professional.
Yeah, one of the things you guys need to know, I've got one of the first relationships that I developed years ago, and he's become one of my closest friends, and I talk with him almost daily. He is a CPA and he's an attorney, and his expertise is in both domestic and international tax law. And so he's involved in every major deal that I do. Bruce is a part of those deals. And I actually met him through BNI when I launched my brick and mortar business back in the early 2000s. I met Bruce in fact, it was before, I actually met him before I launched that business. Because at that time, what I was doing is I was consulting on telecommunications costs. It was a side business that I had started up with a franchise. And so I was going to BNI sessions, and I met Bruce at BNI. So for you guys that are just getting started, think about that, because that's how I got started. I went to BNI every single week, and I did it continuously for a year. And then after the year, I realized that the customers were no longer the customers that were suited for what I was doing. So then I stayed associated with that same group for another year. I would occasionally go in and visit them and blah, blah, blah. But the thing is that by doing BNI, it got me started. And it established a couple of the most important relationships that I have to this day. So one, it's very important as a business person that unless you are yourself an accountant or an attorney, it's a real advantage to have a relationship with somebody like Bruce. In my case, I got really lucky because he's both. And I can tell you that has come in really, it's been hugely beneficial to me on a number of fronts. Okay. So if you don't have that relationship, you want to try to develop that. You definitely want to have an accountant that you talk to on a regular basis, because a lot of decisions that you're going to make in business have tax implications. And making the wrong decision can really put you on the wrong side of the equation. So you want to make sure you're always running things by your CPA. Okay. So if if you're not a CPA, if you're not an attorney, forge a good relationship with your CPA, use it regularly, develop that relationship. It will make you money, and it will save you money. Okay. Any other questions? Nobody? No questions? All right. So here's what I'm going to be doing next. I'm going to be taking kind of that information that I've just generally given you, and I'm going to apply it specifically to Everlesson and LCS. And I'm going to come up with different types of strategies for doing the pricing for those products. And we will talk through those different strategies. We'll probably do that a week from today, next Tuesday. And we'll go through that. Hopefully that will help you with your own pricing strategies. Okay?
Thank you.
Very welcome. So, any other questions before we close tonight? No? All right, guys. Thanks much. Appreciate it. It's been fun. Talk next time.
Support the article link.
Yeah, let me put that up there right now. Thank you. Got that. Let me show. Give me 1 second here. Let me grab that. Okay, here it comes. There you go. Okay, you're welcome. All right, guys. Talk later.
Thank you, Darren. Very welcome.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.